This is the hardest episode in our account, and it deserves to be told plainly, without drama, because the facts need no help. In the last days of the 1870s, large parts of India did not get their rains. The crops failed, and across vast stretches of the country, people began to starve. Not in their hundreds or their thousands, but in numbers so large that historians still debate the total, and every estimate runs into the millions. And here is the line in the ledger that this episode exists to record. During those years, while people in the countryside had nothing to eat, grain continued to be loaded onto trains and ships and exported out of India. Let us be careful and fair from the very first sentence. The drought was real. India's agriculture depended on the monsoon, and when the monsoon failed, harvests failed with it. No government in the world commands the rain. The Great Famine struck in the years 1876 to 1878, falling hardest across the south and west of the subcontinent. And it was not the only one of its kind in this period. There were further terrible famines in 1896 and 1897, and again in 1899 and 1900. A generation lived through a recurring nightmare. So the failure of the rain is not the charge. The charge is what was done and not done once the rain had failed. Because a famine is never only a story about weather. It is a story about whether food reaches the hungry, and that part is decided by people. To understand the response, you have to understand the idea that governed it. This was the age of laissez-faire, the firm belief, fashionable in Britain at the time, that the free market should be left alone to sort things out, and that governments interfered with trade and prices at their peril. Applied to a famine, this doctrine produced a chilling logic. If the state stepped in to feed people or to stop grain leaving, it would, the thinking went, distort the market and do more harm than good in the long run. Presiding over the Great Famine of the 1870s was the Viceroy, Lord Lytton, and under his administration, this free market doctrine was followed with a coldness that disturbed many observers even at the time. Relief that might have saved lives was held back out of a fear of interfering with trade and of encouraging the poor to depend on charity. And so we arrive at the fact that this episode is built around, stated soberly, because it is almost unbelievable. In these years of mass starvation, India did not run out of grain entirely. Grain existed. But under the logic of free trade and the pull of higher prices elsewhere, grain continued to be exported out of the country, carried in part on those very railways sold to India as a gift, the ones we traced last episode, the lines built to reach the ports. The trains that could have moved food inland to the starving were, in significant measure, moving food outward to be sold abroad. The hungry could not pay. The export market could. And the market, left to itself as doctrine demanded, sent the grain to whoever paid the most. This is the meaning of the episode's title. The famine was not simply suffered. In a real and documented sense, food was leaving the country while its people died for the want of it. There was relief of a kind, and the story of that relief contains one of the most debated decisions of the whole period. The government did set up relief works, projects where the destitute could labor in exchange for food. But these came wrapped in conditions designed by the same market logic. Relief was deliberately made hard to get and meager, so that no one would seek it unless truly desperate. People often had to travel great distances and perform heavy physical labor to receive a ration at all. And then there was the ration itself. A scale of relief associated with the administrator, Sir Richard Temple, set the food given to a laboring person at a level that critics, then and since, condemned as too low to sustain a working adult through hard labor. The Temple wage, as it became known, was defended at the time as preventing waste and dependency. To its many critics, it was something far grimmer, a ration calculated down toward the edge of survival. We will not pretend the experts agree on every detail of how many this failed, or by how much. They do not. But the controversy itself tells you that, even by the standards of that era, thoughtful people looked at these measures and were appalled. In the aftermath, the empire did what empires do after a catastrophe. It formed a commission. A famine commission was appointed to study what had happened and to recommend how India might prevent, or at least soften, the next one, through famine codes, relief planning, and public works. These reforms were real, and in later famines, some lessons were, haltingly, applied. It would be unfair to say nothing was learned, but step back, and the deeper accounting of this series comes back into focus. We have spent 3 episodes watching wealth and grain and revenue flow outward from India by design. The home charges, the drain, the railways built for export. The famines are where that machinery met a failed harvest, and the human cost of an extractive system became impossible to hide. The numbers, the millions, we leave deliberately unrounded and attributed to the historians who still debate them, because to fix a false precision on this would dishonor it. What is not in dispute is the shape of the thing. Food left a starving country, and a doctrine stood at the door and called it trade. We hold this episode quietly, and we move on, but we carry its lesson into the rest of the account. The empire's books, we have seen, could balance on paper while the country beneath them broke. Grain could be an export, even as it was a matter of life and death. And that word, export, points us to our next chapter, and to a question of how India came to depend so heavily on selling raw materials abroad in the first place. For there was a time, not long before all this, when India did not export raw cotton and import finished cloth. India was the workshop. India clothed the world. Next time, the story of how the world's greatest textile producer was slowly turned into a market for someone else's cloth. Unmaking the world's workshop. Tareekh ka Hisaab. History, audited. Hisaab abhi baki hai. The account isn't settled yet.